Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of UGA Sports. My name is Roddy Nabulsi. I'm the publisher of UGA Sports. And then there's my right-hand man, the guy that does everything at UGA Sports, our managing editor, Anthony Dasher, the real power behind the throne, if you will. I don't really do anything around here except make snarky comments about the playoff committee. Dash is actually a real reporter, and we're going to get Dash's insights onto the you've got a story on the front page of UGAsports.com on the playoff committee's latest rankings. I know this isn't the end-all, be-all, but Dash, I'm looking at Georgia at number 10. I'm thinking, what the hell? Mainly because there's not a lot of room for Georgia to move up unless other teams fall out. So it's like you don't have another big – and not that they need another big game. Georgia's played the toughest schedule of anybody, but how the hell do you move up to even host a game at this point?
Well, that's going to be a little bit difficult. But like you said, there are, a lot more games to be played, especially in the SEC. I mean, Georgia, in my opinion, may actually have it well, they do have it easier than anyone else. They don't have any more conference games to play, whereas Texas has two. They've got to go to A&M. Alabama has two. They've got to go to Oklahoma, then host Auburn. And Ole Miss has to go to Florida, coming up here this week. And even though, I think Ole Miss is, I know they're going to be favored. I think they're a 10-point favorite to win this ball game. These other teams have the hoops they've got to jump through before, we totally know what all these seedings, are going to be. But all Georgia has to do is just win these next two games. I mean, I don't, at this point, you just want to get in the dance. Just like the basketball tournament, just make it. And if you make it, you've got an opportunity. But yes, you look at the teams and kind of where they're ranked right now. You see Indiana sitting there at number 5. We all know they're not that number 5 team in the country. But that's just the way the seedings go right now. But I will say this: if you see, Indiana get thumped this weekend by Ohio State, which I suspect is going to happen, look for Indiana to kind of fall like BYU did, and kind of how Georgia did after they lost that game to Ole Miss.
It's funny though. Georgia loses; they go from number 3 to number 12. They drop 9 points. Tennessee loses; they only drop 6.
Well, they did beat Alabama though too. But
Georgia beat Texas.
I know Georgia beat Texas. I mean, I know, but.
I'm just saying there's no rhyme or reason for it. Even the punishment. So we're talking about Indiana dropping. They should plummet, and they should. Fair.
And that's the biggest.
You may win. Who knows?
And that's the biggest gripe I think Coach Kirby Smart has. We don't know what the factors are. There's been no clarification. We don't know how much strength of schedule matters. We don't know how any of this matters. It's just sometimes it seems like just based on win-loss records, by itself, which that's not quite the way it should be. I mean, like Coach says, you try to get some of these committee members to try to go to Ole Miss, go to Alabama and watch these games being played, see how tough it really is.
I'm with you. We got Harrison Reno joining us, and I'll also bring on Lance McCurley, two of our stars here at UGAsports.com. Harrison, you came on first. Let's get your thoughts here because I'm with Dash. Kirby Smart said after the game, and he was set up perfectly. He said, "Hey, what do you think of the Tennessee game?" He goes, and the playoffs. He goes, "Well, I don't know what the hell they want," and he's hammered that. And I guarantee you, he thought of that before he knew the question was coming. If he wins, they're going to ask me about the playoffs, and I think he had an agenda to set that up, and he's been proven right today.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. Georgia at 10, they only go up 2 spots. Tennessee only drops to 11, and they're not going to be one of the first teams out, obviously, at that 11 spot. I think y'all said it. They're only looking at the win and loss column, and it seems to be the loss column weighs the heaviest. It doesn't matter who you play. Indiana and Penn State on their schedule have had favorable schedules. India has no losses, about to play a game where they could potentially use. Penn State obviously has 1 loss, but it doesn't seem like they're being punished for it. I think it's funny that Ward Manuel is the CFP chair of this year with how Michigan's doing. It definitely looks like there's some Big Ten bias, especially within that top 5.
Yeah, apparently the Ward Manuel said they do value strength of schedule. Dash.
But they don't say how much. It's not a formula. I mean,
hey, I value Lance McCurley, but I'm not going to tell you how much.
I favor chocolate Pop-Tarts, but I also like strawberry. Which one do I really like more? I mean, come on.
I'm with you there. All right, Lance, give me your thoughts.
I'm going to be completely honest. It sounds like they just throw shit at a wall and hope it sticks, to be completely honest. I mean, I've been waiting to say that for like 5 minutes once I found out. Obviously, Oregon deserves to be number 1. Ohio State, I get Ohio. We'll see how good Ohio State and Indiana really are this weekend. I think that Ohio State is a top 5 team. Texas, Notre Notre Dame and Miami. Those are two teams that Notre Dame obviously has that loss to Northern Illinois earlier in the season, and I really wouldn't think that the committee in previous years would penalize the team for that, which it turns out Alabama was able to sneak in in 2021 with an early kind of midseason loss, but obviously Notre Dame hadn't played anybody outside of that. And Miami has won several 1-point games, 1-possession games,
controversial games.
Yeah, over terrible teams, and then they lost to a terrible Georgia Tech team. And I get it, Alabama, Ole Miss above Georgia, but just Penn State couldn't even score a damn touchdown at home against Ohio State. And what is their best win? You're going to tell me that USC is their best win, which is absolutely ridiculous. So it's just exactly like what are they really, Kirby Smart's right, what are they really looking for? And
they're looking at win-loss record. There's no question. That's why you have Penn State there in Indiana, Notre Dame. When Notre Dame lost, I'm like, I give Dane credit. I said, they are out of the playoffs. He goes, nope, they'll come right back in. And I know it's recency bias, but I'm like, that is such a bad loss. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter because they play everybody else. Anthony, I know you're not a giant betting guy. I think you're the worst thing you do is play fantasy baseball. Dash plays contact fantasy baseball. This is not a league for the weak. He's serious at it. But you understand lines and you understand how you can go. Which team ahead of Georgia right now would be favored in the betting markets?
Pick up, right? I didn't hear you. You kind of faded out on me.
Which team would be favored against Georgia in the betting markets?
I think Oregon would. Okay. And I think and I think Ohio State would be a 2 or 3 point favorite.
I'd put Alabama in there because
that'd be a 1 2 point maybe. I mean, maybe a pick them. I don't know, but there's not many. Put it that way that would be favored. UGA, and none of them would be certainly not be a double digit favorite. Anything of that description, but. Just shows again that Georgia, if they play like they're capable of, I mean, they could beat anybody, who we see listed on this chart right now if they play like they're supposed to.
They could also lose to anybody on this.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. We don't know. That's what has made this season so interesting, I guess, if you want to call it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'd probably add Ole Miss to that. So just saying, because it did beat, now on a neutral
would be because they beat Georgia earlier.
Neutral site, that's completely different. But I'm going to put Alabama as a favorite against just about anybody because when Milroe is on, he's unstoppable. He's
they've changed the way they're playing him right now too.
Yeah.
It used to be they tried to, make him be like Michael Penix from last year. Now they said, just let him be, Jalen Milroe. Let's do what he can do good. Instead of trying to, pigeonhole him into a play a certain way.
Yeah, it's just like Georgia with Jalen Walker. They're like, okay, we got to get uncomfortable with his skill set. So let's work it out. Harrison, I'm looking at this list here, and I do feel like I don't say they're not looking deeper because they say they do. And we had just had Holly Rowe on, and she said she went through a simulated committee meeting over the summer where they were given 25 teams and you had to go in and rank them and dig deep. And she says it is in depth, but to the untrained eye, maybe a little buzzed from what I got drinking in front of me. It just looks like he went, okay, we're going to put everybody 0 losses, 1 loss, 2 loss. Mm-hmm. And then most recent, we're going to put Alabama up there, and, then we're going to put Miami, then Ole Miss. And it's like, even those 3, not keeping Georgia and Tennessee out of it. Like, you're going to tell me that you think Miami is better than Ole Miss? You were drunk. You were off your nut. So I'm just looking at them like this looks like surface level analysis and not, hey, we looked at who they played and quality wins.
Yeah, I don't think resume matters. And it's actually interesting. Somebody was asking me today if I thought they'd go to 9 games. The SEC would go to 9 games after the season.
Never.
I'm like, yeah, I don't see it with how they're reacting to the 8-game schedule now. What's the incentive for these coaches to play a 9-game schedule and further cannibalize themselves?
Now, I'm with you. Actually, I was about to look up a text that I sent a certain person high up in the Athletic Association. I'm like, you would be a blankety-blank idiot to vote to go to 9 games. That's just Why would you do that? Lance, going forward, I would set it so that you're not doing the Clemson game ever again. You're not doing any of these home and away with good schools. I would do my Georgia schedule and say, okay, we got to play 8 games, and I'll need 4 teams we can pay to come to our stadium. I'm gonna get 3. I'm gonna get 3 home games from the SEC slate. I'm gonna go play in Jacksonville, and then I'm gonna have 4 additional home games. We've got 7 home games a year. Kirby's undefeated at home for 1,000 years. So why would you ever schedule anybody of note?
Exactly, and it kind of works out in their favor this year or next year. Is UCLA is off the schedule, so I know that UCLA is not a top tier opponent right now, but that's a trip to LA they don't got to take. Who did they replace him with? Was it Marshall? I'm pretty sure. So if you pull up UGA's non-conference schedule, I believe it's Marshall, Austin Peay, Georgia Tech, and there's one more cupcake in there. But you still got Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss. Granted, you got that at home. But, yeah, I completely agree. Why would you want to go to a nine-game conference schedule, risk losing another game against a tough opponent like that, and then have the committee kind of treat you like this, like they have the past couple of weeks?
Let me jump in real quick, Roddy, kind of to follow up on that, just a little bit. 9-game schedule side. Coach Smart was asked today. In fact, I'll have a little story on this with a follow-up with Ward Manuel. I was asked specifically, why would you schedule these type of non-conference games? You know what his answer was? For the fans. Fans want these type of games. Fans want to play these exciting, big-time non-conference games. That's been one of the biggest complaint over the year. Fans complain about having to pay so much money to see, Little Sister of the Poor come to Athens. They want to see some of these big-time programs. And so where I think the 9-game schedule could affect that. I mean, Kirby still wants to play these big-time, opponents. I mean, bring them on, he said. I mean, they've still got a game schedule of Florida State, Clemson, Ohio State, North Carolina State. They've got a home and home. Kirby wants to keep playing these guys.
I'm sure he does. He enjoys it. He knows his team gets up for it. They will often play down to their opponents, no question. But if I'm his boss, I'm like, hey, I know you want to play Clemson and you want to go play UCLA and you want to, do a home and away with somewhat, a traditional powerhouse. No, sir. You have to make the most out of your SEC schedule because that's bad enough. Plus, we have the home games that you get to recruit at. You say you like that. So Kirby will do that. He'll any place, anytime. That's the way he does it. But you know what folks like more than those big games? Hoisting those trophies, getting that confetti. Man, that's their number one thing. Dash, I want to move real quick because I know you got to go there about your – Dash is covering basketball for us right now. Again, he's the only one that does any real work around here. I saw a situation where the projection was Georgia's in a great spot. At the ranking holes, they would play Penn State, then Miami. I saw that in a Yahoo projection the other day, and I said, oh, please. I quote tweeted, said, oh, please. A lot of people thought I was like, oh, please, this is BS. I'm like, no, please. I would love to see Georgia play Penn State. I would love to see Georgia play Miami.
That's how it breaks down.
Okay. Yeah, you don't get that home game, but you're going to go to Death. What do they call Penn State? Is it still a Death Valley too?
No, Happy Valley.
Happy Valley, whatever. Yeah, you're going to go to Happy Valley, kick their teeth in, and then beat the shit out of Miami. Yeah, okay. And then you're right there in the final. So I'm all for it if that's the way it works out.
Yeah. As cool as it would be to see a home game on December 20th or 21st in Athens, I think a trip to Happy Valley would be absolutely awesome. Go in there, beat the shit out of them with a whiteout.
Yeah, no, that would be.
I got to run, Roddy.
All right, I'll see you.
Yeah.
Anthony Dasher. That's our managing editor, Anthony Dasher of UGAsports.com, one of the best in the business. But don't tell him I ever said that. I can't have him thinking that. I also would. What if though? And this is why. Harrison, why I want to see Georgia move up. I want them to host a home game out of just absolute self-interest and convenience. But I was hoping to get somebody like, get an Indiana to come to your place. Give me a Boise State, give me a Miami here. I think what's going to happen, though, if any other school gets a home conference game, it just doesn't look like we're going to see a lot of SEC teams host.
Yeah, it really doesn't. That's kind of the question going through my head right now. What needs to happen for Georgia to host? Is there a path? Like if Indiana loses, they're at 5 now, and they lose this weekend, which I think they will. Does that help Georgia out?
To the number 2 team. So how far do they really drop?
Yeah, like it's a one for it would be kind of a cool comparison just in terms of how far Georgia dropped following their loss to see where they are now, where Indiana would. Another question, Roddy, how does the SEC championship factor into this? Like we see Georgia at 10 now. If you have a 2-loss team going to the SEC championship and lose, and they have 3 losses, it'd be interesting to see what happens in terms of the shakeout for a team like Georgia who may not be there and has to sit at home.
Yeah, you're out. But and here's the thing: we were assuming that, and Lance, correct me if I'm wrong here. Mm-hmm. We were assuming that if Indiana loses, that they should plummet. Maybe some people say, "Oh, they're out of the playoffs." It'd be their first loss. It would be to a top, the number 2 team in the nation. They'd only have the 1, but they haven't played anybody. Well, that doesn't matter anywhere else.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? We're thinking that their strength of schedule matters if they lose, but strength of schedule just doesn't seem to matter at all. They still only have 1 loss, and I think that would keep them ahead of some of these other teams, these SEC teams. I'm assuming that they would drop 12, 13. They would plummet. Yeah. There's no guarantee based on what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. I've had conversations with people like that all week, just asking me about it, and I'm kind of on the fence. But I'm starting to lean more, what if they lose a close game to Ohio State?
Ooh, that's a good point.
They're gonna have one loss.
1 close loss, yeah. And when we, as Georgia people cover, we're like, yeah, Georgia lost to Alabama, but they also took the lead back in that game and they lost by 1 score, give that game 3 extra minutes and maybe they win. So as we were trying to, I don't say spin, but we were trying to put that Alabama loss in context. Indiana could say the same thing, and all of a sudden they dropped to 8, and Ole Miss and Georgia and Tennessee are sitting behind them, going, "What the hell?"
Yeah, and you've also got to factor in, you've got to have the Big 12 winner in somewhere in there too, and I guess ACC, which is probably going to be Miami, but I mean it's just one of those things that if you see. So Indiana loses this weekend. Say it's a close loss. They're at number 5. Who's likely going to jump them? Is it going to be Notre Dame? Is it going to be Alabama? Is it going to be Miami too? Does this? I would just wonder if this pushes Georgia back a spot, even though they're probably going to mollywop or should mollywop UMass. But I mean, just does a close loss drop Georgia this weekend? Does that affect that? Is that a crazy question someone asked me this morning?
I thought the comment there by Maverick's pretty interesting. What if you have Clemson beat Miami?
Yeah.
Now you got like the number 17 seed, they get in.
Yeah.
Hey, automatic bid.
Which I think could happen too.
Oh, yeah. Dude, Miami is – again, I say they're, it's fool's gold. They're living on Tulsa time. They're borrowed time. But you don't know how these things play out. You didn't think Notre Dame was going to lose to Northern Illinois. John Hicks says, how's Texas ranked number 3 with their best win is at Vandy?
Yeah, that's another head scratch.
What is their best win?
I mean, you would think that it would be – would it be Michigan? I mean, would it be Michigan?
Ain't ranked.
True, but I mean, so if you look at, we're going to find a lot about Texas. I know
that Texas A&M game is looming.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's a playing game, right? For Texas, at least.
Pretty much. Texas hasn't played anybody really with a pulse. Colorado State, Michigan, UT San Antonio, Louisiana Monroe, Mississippi State. Everybody, kind of found out how Oklahoma was frauds, before they played them on October 12th. And then, you also look at a Texas team that's struggling against Arkansas. But again, Arkansas did beat Tennessee.
Yeah.
So
well, here's a question for you, Harrison. Texas loses to Texas A&M in a close game. SEC, at the end of the regular season. They still make it into the SEC title game. what happens if they lose?
Yeah, I
I
guess
back-to-back losses. They go from being 3 right now to being completely out because they'd have to pick up their second loss against Texas A&M, which would make them plummet. So then the SEC title game becomes a play-in game for them into the playoffs. They get run over by Alabama. Alabama shoots up. They're the SEC champs. They go right in. And all of a sudden, Texas back-to-back losses. They're out completely. Who the hell would have seen that scenario? Or let's say they win and then lose. They win against Texas A&M. Okay, boom, right into it. And they lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game. And they pick up their second loss in that game, which people say, oh, well, it shouldn't count as a SEC championship game. But last year, Georgia fell 5 spots after losing the SEC championship game. So I'm just saying, this stuff's getting sideways, man.
It really is. I think it was you retweeted because Greg Sankey had a comment like, oh, they would not dare leave the SEC championship loser out. And you're like, it happened last year. And I know that's the 4-team era, but I mean, yeah, that's a realistic scenario. If Texas loses in back-to-back weeks and loses to a team like Alabama in the SEC championship, they have to be out.
What if they split?
Yeah, if they split, it gets even more interesting. And I would love to see where they're ranked in comparison to Georgia, because Georgia has the head-to-head over Texas. And they'd both be 2-loss teams in that scenario. How does that shape out?
Georgia gets screwed.
Yeah, yeah, but at least Georgia's losses would be to 2 top 10 teams, where Texas would have a loss to a top 10 team, and dude, Texas A&M, they're 15. So, but of course, as they move up, after beating Texas, they probably jump into the top 15, which is Lance's scary scenario, where all of a sudden Texas A&M beats Texas, and Texas falls down into that 8, 9, 10 range, and Texas A&M has to move up, and boy, you've got 5, 6 schools between 7 and 12, all in the SEC. There's no way the committee lets that happen. There's no way you could have Texas with a loss, Texas A&M with a win, and Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Tennessee. That'd be 6 out of the top 12.
It really does.
6 to 12.
It really does make me wonder kind of how, in terms of like from Georgia's perspective, that they're like, to me, it seems like they're the only team being docked for inconsistency, whereas you have a team like Miami who looks like they can lay an egg every other week.
You're 100% right. That was the inconsistency you're talking about. What did the athletic director say about that?
Wait, you talking about Josh Brooks, or you talking about Ward Manuel?
Josh Brooks.
Oh,
He laid out a good case.
Yeah. I mean, Georgia's case is, hey, we've lost to Ole Miss and Alabama, 2 top 10 teams, but we also beat the number 17 ranked Clemson, and they beat, oh man, it's blanking on me, Texas at DKR. I mean, that's their resume. And
now you beat Tennessee.
Yeah, and now you've beat Tennessee.
Tennessee team that beat Alabama.
I'm just saying. So the athletic director told everybody to go on Feinbaum because I knew this was coming. I've known Josh Brooks for too long, and I knew that when he was going to be on Feinbaum, he was going to say something. So I know we don't watch Feinbaum that much. It's just I'm usually doing work. I love the guy. I love having him on our shows. He's fantastic. I just don't get to watch as much as I'd like. But when they were in Athens, I'm like, he's going to have Josh Brooks on. Josh is going to say something because Josh can't not say something. So he says, hey, what do you think about where you're at in the playoffs? And he says, the Josh Brooks comes on and says, the committee put out a statement saying that they were concerned about Georgia's inconsistencies. Well, I got questions about the inconsistency of their rankings. Well, we thought that there might be a course correction because they heard nothing but people furious about how strength of schedule hasn't been taken into account. And this week they're consistent because they're consistently saying strength of schedule don't matter. Just my 2 cents. I don't know. The committee hates UGA. There was a good question there. Who else does Tennessee have left?
They have Vanderbilt coming up soon. I don't know if it's this week here. I'm gonna pull up their schedule now. They have
Vanderbilt. Normally end with Vandy.
I think they're at Vanderbilt. Yep, they're at Vanderbilt the last game of the season. They've cut UTEP this this Saturday.
So that'll give. Here's the thing, Vandy. You would assume they would beat Vandy, but Vandy's a little tougher.
Vandy's streaky this year.
All right. So we basically are getting a rematch, more than likely, of Oregon and Ohio State in their championship game. Where does the loser fall?
If it's Ohio State, I think Ohio State could likely fall at playoffs. I don't see that happening, but I mean that's two losses. That's two losses against the number one team in the country would make me think that they don't fall out. But like you said, if you have that, what if Texas A&M beats Texas and you just have that pile up and included from like 5 through or 6 through 10 or 6 through 12. Obviously, where does Indiana falls into that too? I think that depending on the outcome of the game, if Oregon beats their ass, I think that they deserve to be out, even though they've got a win over Indiana. But again, Indiana's only played one team this year, essentially, and it's Ohio State. And Ohio State lost 2 games to the number one team in the country.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I know we got Bo Moore, Brad Spears, Rod Robinson, Maverick, our buddy Bobby in the comment section. I appreciate all you folks being with us. Let me put this out to the group at large, to the comment section. Which is, how do I put it this way? We're looking at the Texas and A&M game as being one of the last regular season kerfuffles that could have a big effect on this. That's why I was asking about Oregon and Ohio State in the championship game. A lot of the conference championships will determine how this all shakes out. But prior to that, do any of these teams face each other besides Ohio State and Indiana? So you got that one. Does Notre Dame play anybody of note? Alabama's got Auburn, but
Notre Dame has a play. I think Notre Dame still has to. They play Army this weekend.
And at USC, right?
Yeah, it's at USC. And I can honestly see USC, as bad as they are. I can see a USC team beating Notre Dame.
Maybe, but but again, that's not one that we're like, okay, this is going to be a close one here. Penn State have anybody? They don't.
No, their whole schedule.
That kind of brings me back. That's why I thought this week. I know we've got more weeks of this, but I'm like, this week is so pivotal because there's not a lot of. There won't be a lot of cannibalization on the top of this list, 1 through 9.
Mm-hmm. At least not in the SEC.
Yeah.
Minnesota and Maryland coming up.
Roddy, I'm looking at the schedule now. I know Georgia fans are rooting for them already, but Syracuse plays Miami last week of the season at Syracuse. Not only would that be big, if Fran Brown can win that game, not only can he shower, but he can.
Yeah, I was about to say, Roddy, do you see that?
Yeah, taking a drink, Harrison. Come on.
Sorry.
Spit liquor out my nose. That'd be awesome.
For context, no one. I don't know if anyone saw that. Just Google Fran Brown shower. He said in a post-game press conference, not this past weekend, but the week before, that he doesn't shower after a loss. He waits until he lets the stink with him go to bed until he showers the next day. So it's a new day. And he can turn the page. I think he's being dead serious when he said that.
He said he's not even allowed in his bed. I think he has to go sleep on the couch.
It's either his partner or girlfriend, something. He said significant other, something like that. So
yeah, that would not fly with my wife. She'd be like, no. And here's the thing: if you were on the sideline, it's gross. You were covered and you were around sweaty, stinky men who come up and grab you, hug you, lean on you. It ain't pretty. So yeah. Oh, we got Kirby Smart in here. She's a riot. She's an absolute riot. Good person to follow.
One of my favorite Twitter follows. Good God.
Easy now.
You too.
I'm just saying she's funny.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying too.
He lies like her. All right.
She can DM me if she wants.
Yeah. All right. Looking at this, it's going to be very interesting to see if any of the Clemson South Carolina game, how that comes down to whether or not that let's say Miami loses again and then Clemson loses South Carolina, which is absolutely possible, and those two weak ass teams go face off each other in a championship game, and one of them's going to get in there with 2 or 3 losses, and you're going to have a bunch of 2-loss teams who are really good in the SEC going, why do they get a top 4 seed? I'm telling you, man, we're going to be year 1 into this, and there are already going to be people with pitchforks and torches and riots in the streets.
I mean, how long does the automatic top 4 automatic bids last? I don't see it lasting beyond 2026, right? And how long does the 12-team playoff last? Are we going? I've already seen people talking about 14.
I believe it's 2 years.
You know what would make this a lot, and I said it when they came out with it 12. We did a live reaction when I was actually taking a walk, and they said, "Okay, we're going to 12 teams," and we did a live, and I actually did it while I was walking around down Snapfinger Road, holding my phone like an idiot. But I said, this is going to screw the SEC and conference championships are going to screw with this thing. And then they said, well, these 4 guys get buys and, they get to skip the first round. And then there's the G5 who automatically gets a bid. And I'm like, this is so effed up. Just make it 16 teams. No buys, 1 to 16. Do it just like the NCAA basketball tournament. Committee picks them. You put them in their places. You can host them at the first ones get to play at home. Great, the top 8 teams or whoever. But after that, and it'd be so much simpler without all this crap into it and qualifying and conferences. But I know to get to 12 teams, you had to agree to this.
Yeah,
we just had an election, and people are complaining about the Electoral College or the popular vote and all that. I'm like, look, for us to get here, there had to be a compromise between these states and those states, to get these conferences to buy into this whole thing, they had to have assurances and guarantees, and that's why we are where we are. But I'm with you, Harrison. Shit ain't gonna last. No. It's not gonna last because the folks who, and you can call it a bait and switch. You convince these other conferences to join into this, and then a few years later you change the rules. Well, what are they going to do? They're not going to leave this television money. They're not going to go do their own thing. So,
well, Roddy, I guess my question that I've been thinking about, because it was a big talk in the offseason when this was still going through, like for the SEC and the Big Ten going forward in these negotiations, they've already talked about, splitting away. There's been those ideas floated in those rooms behind closed doors. I mean, with how this shakes out, how does, the next 2 years of this impact those conversations? I'm very curious in terms of that, because we've already heard reports in the summer about the SEC and the Big Ten trying to strong arm everybody and say, hey, we want this many guaranteed spots. And then you leave the rest for everybody else. And you're talking about compromise. And that's like, makes me think about, well, are these other conferences going to compromise with that? Going to agree to that?
Oh, yeah. The negotiations are ongoing all the time.
Yeah.
I speak to people who say, yeah, we're in discussions about this. We're in discussions about that. The first part is, how will it affect it? So much of this was unknown. We did not know what the issues would be. We still, this is week 3 or 4 of these playoff rankings.
3.
Week 3.
Yeah.
We still haven't seen an official criteria of what the committee's looking for. And I get it. You keep it nebulous so you're not held down. And you got to have your television show. You got to have wiggle room so you don't put down hard and fast rules. And you can say whatever you want to say, but they come out. So some of the issues that are going to pop up with this whole 12-team playoff they could not anticipate. So a lot of their negotiations and changes will be in reaction to new and emerging issues. The second part about the negotiations, while the smaller schools could say, look, we can opt out of this. This is why I say the Big Ten and the SEC, they always have the threat of, we're going to step aside, do our own thing. To hell with all of you. See you Big 12, see you everybody else. Y'all go have your own thing. We're going to have big boy football over here. We're going to we'll have 16 teams. They'll have 16 teams. and we'll have a 32-team NFL light conference or college football. And I guarantee you the champions of that, and then we won't have to share even revenue. We'll get a different deal, and we won't have to share it with you guys at all. And nobody's going to care that Memphis or Louisiana Monroe or whatever school, NC State gets left out. It's like, sorry, that's just Georgia or the SEC will pick up a couple schools, and there'll be some conference realignments, and it'll be just a power 32. So there's always that. I don't call it a nuclear option, but that big option, because the ones that make the money kind of make the rules. And if you see the Big 12 or the Big 10 and the SEC feel like they get hosed, they can always be like, hey, at the end of this TV contract or the end of this deal, we're walking. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Oh, I like this. Moving up to 8 is harder than you think because the highest ranked conference champs 1 through 4. That's a great point, Bobby.
Yeah.
Bubby, excuse me. So maybe I'm expecting it to jump up more because of what they are, but it's going to be a little bit tougher there. Yeah.
I really like how y'all put it earlier in terms of talking about who Georgia would be favored over and who might be favored over Georgia. I think on a neutral field, the only teams that I agree, it's probably maybe Alabama is, I think, for sure. Although, that line in Tuscaloosa was half a point, closed at half a point.
Yeah.
And I think Georgia closed as the favorite for that game, which is always interesting to me considering, Alabama's gotten better outside of that one game, but Georgia's remained the favorite. I'm curious about that, but I'd assume would Oregon be favored over Georgia? Ohio State? I think there was all close lines. I mean, I'd be curious to see what the spread is on Georgia versus Miami, Georgia versus Penn State. I feel like Georgia versus Indiana is at least a 14-point spread.
17.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw 9 earlier today and I'm projected, and I was like, there's no way that's right.
I would hammer that.
Yeah. Hell yeah, I'd hammer that. And I would
you need 10 to win? I'm taking it.
I wouldn't want to bet on Georgia much because Georgia doesn't cover
No.
that spread a lot. But I mean, in a playoff game like that, especially if Georgia gets disrespected and is a visiting team, is it Bloomington, wherever they are? Yeah. Hell yeah. I'd hammer that.
Okay, so our good buddy over at How About Them Effing Dogs podcast said, so Ward Emanuel is asked, what is carrying the day when it comes to the arguments over the playoff rankings? And it sounds like we're not really worried about what transpired a month or two ago. Well, that's great because Georgia lost to Alabama a month or two ago. So with their recent win over Tennessee, I guess that counts. That's the problem is when you don't have this is all judgment calls.
Yeah.
And you can have your mission statement and what you factor into it, but without hard and fast rules, that changes from week to week and it becomes a gut feeling thing. Just like the fact that you dropped Georgia from 1 to 6, that had never happened. Go undefeated in the regular season last year, lose the SEC championship game, and drop to 6 behind FSU. It's mind-boggling. So we learned last year. It's what have you done for me lately? Don't lose late. And so all the people in the comment section are saying, "Hey, just went out." Yeah, we were assuming that because you got to beat UMass. UMass is terrible. They just fired their coach. Although sometimes teams play different when they lose a coach. I get it. Tech is not a slam dunk. Tech's better. Tech has a running quarterback. That sort of stuff gives Georgia fits. And Georgia plays inconsistently. I get that. But let's say you went out, and that's why that's premises. We started this whole thing with what if how does Georgia move up in this? Because I thought that I didn't think they'd be 6, 7, but 10 kind of surprised me. And now I'm thinking there's no way Georgia's hosting a game because there's just not enough of these guys above them going head to head or playing a tough team. And the ones that are going head to head, they might not drop that much because, Penn State loses a close one to Ohio State and they won't get dropped 13 points or 9 spots like Georgia did, or they won't get dropped 6 points. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. I think you brought up Georgia Tech, and That's a good point because I believe it was last week after Miami lost to Georgia Tech. Did Ward and Manuel not come out and say they lost to a respectable, quote, respectable Georgia Tech team? I am curious to see if that holds up.
Yeah.
If Georgia beats them and whoops them, like maybe they should.
Yeah. But again, you lost to Tech. And you shouldn't have. Well, okay, so if that is a respectable loss, what about their unrespectable wins where the refs gave them 2 wins?
Yeah, one against Virginia Tech, and what was the other one?
Wasn't it the first game of the season where they just had some BS went down? It was back-to-back weeks where they just got saved.
So ever since that Tech game, they've kind of
Virginia Tech and Cal, wasn't it? They beat Cal by 1 point.
It was Cal literally by a point, and then they beat Virginia Tech on that controversial call. They also beat Louisville 52-45, and in a close game. I remember that. I think that was the day of the Texas game. I think.
DJ Cali, they lost to Tech, who had a quarterback that couldn't throw.
They ran the 2 quarterback system. Aaron Philo would come in on passing downs, and Haynes King would be in there on rundowns.
You know, a lot of people say, well, if you know what they're going to do, then you can stop them. Yeah, how'd that work out for you, Miami? Well, Tennessee knew Georgia was going to throw it.
Yeah.
It didn't stop them. So shout out to the Tennessee fans who were really angry about the referees. I get it. Covering Georgia for as many years as I have, there are games where you feel like the referees absolutely robbed you, but usually when you have to point out that you got outscored 31-7 after you went up 10, it doesn't feel like the refs could do it. But again, there are times where you just feel like, hey, they jobbed us so many times, they wouldn't let us win, and I understand. I'm not agreeing with you, but I understand the sentiment.
I believe the penalty allotment was Tennessee at 9, Georgia at 7. Like went back and looked at it.
Oh, and there's some that Georgia didn't get called, and there's some questionable calls. But
Roddy, it boggles. It's funny to me when you look at the 3-year span that Georgia's had. It's funny to me how many times we've had, from a media perspective, your fan bases how many fan bases have there been, or how many instances has there been over this 3-year run where they're like, oh, if this happened or this didn't happen, they could beat Georgia. Like we talk about Georgia's been so dominant over the last 3 or 4 years, but there's those cases like Ohio State, Florida State, Tennessee 2 times in a row, all talking about, hey, if this happened or this didn't happen, we could have beat Georgia.
Yeah, well, if it hadn't rained, they'd have beat Georgia 2 years ago.
I loved your tweet about them this morning because it was indeed pouring here in Athens.
Was it last year? Who was out? They had one guy out. It wasn't Hyatt.
No, it was Hyatt 2 years ago, I think. Was it Squirrel, Brew McCoy?
It was one of those guys. If we'd had him, then they'd have won. I'm like, okay, maybe. But again, there have been times when especially in the Richt years, I was like, hell, we're still mad about Tyler Simmons being offsides, when we know he wasn't. So I get it. But when you have to point to 4 or 5 and saying that would have made the difference, that's when you start to lose credibility. If it's one, like Cal. Was it Cal or was it Virginia Tech?
I believe it was Virginia Tech was the big controversy.
So Virginia Tech, in other words, Virginia Tech has a legit gripe. Tennessee, you don't. I get it. You got, and here's the thing: if you're winning on both lines of scrimmage and the refs job you, then I'm like, yeah, you probably got hosed. But if you're gonna rip a dude's helmet off and then claim that it wasn't a face mask, come on, man. I did think it was funny that Kirby Smart actually said, yeah, everybody tries to go off the field slow to force the other team to burn a timeout. We do it. Really?
Well, he said they get warnings, which I didn't realize they get warnings from the refs. So that's obviously being very. I'm curious to see if maybe Tennessee got a warning in advance of that before the penalty was called.
Well, Trey Wallace, one of the guys I think he's at Fox or Outkick, pointed out that he was on the sideline and he heard them after they called it. He's like, they told him, hey, you got 3 seconds. And everybody, for some reason, just assumed that was you have 3 seconds to start your substitution. And I went and looked up the rule. And yeah, it does say 3 seconds to start your substitution. So if Georgia subs late, let's say there's 12 seconds on the clock, okay, the ref stands over the ball, doesn't let it get snapped, and they get 3 seconds to make their adjustment. So there could be 9 seconds left, and that guy gets to walk out, and the other guy walks off, and so you give him time. But right there in the rules, Rule 5, Section 3, number 2, Article 2, when you're leaving the field, you can't go slow as if to disguise what your personnel is going to be. You have to get off the field in 3 seconds. And you can see that guy kind of waddling off. They tell him to slow down, and all of a sudden he starts moving slower. And then they see that he's not going to make it off in time, and they start waving him to run off, and it's too late. So, I mean, look, it's you got busted. So,
yeah.
But, hey, shout out Tennessee. You're at number 11. You're one behind Georgia. I do think it's funny that in the rankings, Georgia's ahead of Ole Miss in the AP and such. But they don't care. Anyway, that's all we're going to have time for this week or this evening. But we're going to tune back into the basketball game here. We should have a lot more content from basketball. And, of course, the news and notes from today's interview with Kirby Smart or today's press conference are up. Do check out the interview with Holly Rowe. It is phenomenal. She talks about the Georgia being the best atmosphere she's been in all year. I know Ole Miss talked about how great it was, when they took on Georgia. She said this was the best she's seen all year. So I know the Ole Miss fans will be happy about that one. She talks about Carson Beck and what's different for him this year than last year. Said last year it all came a lot easier. So it was very interesting insight into her long conversation with him that you just won't catch anywhere else. And then there's some other fun stuff there about Holly Rowe and Georgia and her relationship with Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo and all those. Check that out on this same channel, same Facebook page, same Twitter feed. You'll be glad that you did. All right, folks. Thanks, Harrison. Thanks, Lance.